I'm Katerina Georgieva. Here's what's making news right now.
It's one of those cases where you kind of shake your head and will never understand, the thought process that led to this.
To pay, an electric bill probably at around $400 to $500 a month for the rest of my life and only increasing, I thought, well, now's the time to go off grid.
He was really great with people. He loved people, and that was, I think, the one thing that really people found it hard to believe, that he could go through what he did and still love people.
Good evening. Thanks for watching. The city's ultimate downtown vision is starting to come together. One piece of that includes Streetcar 351. Yesterday, after a lengthy debate, council voted 7-4 to have it located in Legacy Park near the Karen Avenue pumping station. Dale Molnar has been on the story and is live now at the location. Dale, what can you tell us about that site?
Well, I'm standing here in front of the Legacy Park playground structure. This is approximately where the Legacy Beacon will go. That will feature a gallery with the streetcar, of course, and also washrooms, a terrace, and also food concessions. Most importantly, it will not be higher than Riverside Drive. The main reason why they decided to locate it down here and move it from downriver where it would have obstructed the view. But it will cost more.
Mark my words that once this is built, this will be, on a daily basis, the most well-used destination along our riverfront.
The mayor was among those who voted in favor. So was Councillor Reno Bordelon, who likes the location because it will attract more people to downtown.
We need a more permeable downtown and park system so that the people who are enjoying those parks can also enjoy the park across the street next to the aquatic center, for example, or move slowly up into the downtown.
The location was chosen partly based on the Central Riverfront Implementation Plan, which calls for beacons of interest along the riverfront. Councillor Kieran McKenzie voted against putting the streetcar here because he says it doesn't fit the criteria for the beacon laid out in the plan, partly that it will be too big.
It is important that the size, location, and extent of the buildings constructed on the Central Riverfront be restricted. We're not restricting. We're doing the opposite.
The CRIP, as it's called, foresaw a beacon that would recognize the rail history here. Mike Cardinal opposed locating the streetcar here for that reason.
So my point is that by putting in the transferring the celestial beacon architecture, flipping it to this spot, it's a narrower spot of the river, and it extends in such a way that it covers over and obliterates this piece of history that is actually the point of having something develop at this site.
Cardinal suggested putting the streetcar next to the Chimchuk Museum, but the city does not own that land. Now, it's going to cost $1 million more to put it here than it would have downriver. It'll be $1 million more, $8.4 million it'll cost here, and that's mainly due to the work they have to do to prepare the site for the beacon. Katerina?
And Dale, council was also supposed to deal with the new canopy proposal for the Riverfront Festival Plaza. So what happened with that?
Well, council decided to refer the report back to administration because of the hefty price tag. They want administration to come back with options that don't include a price tag of like around $30 million. Now, that motion was put forward by Reno Bordelon, who once again wants to see options that will encourage more connectivity with downtown, but that does not include a tunnel under Riverside Drive. Katerina?
Thanks for this, Dale. The CBC's Dale Molnar live tonight. We turn now to a very unusual case. A Windsor man pleaded guilty to manslaughter today in the shooting death of his best friend. It happened back in 2017 when the two were playing Russian roulette. The CBC's Jason Vio joins us live now to explain all of this. Jason, what happened here?
Well, William Green was 53 at the time he fatally shot his best friend, who was just shy of his 60th birthday when he died. On March 17th of 2017, the two had been drinking Crown Royal whiskey and smoking marijuana since about 7 at night that day while playing Russian roulette. And all of these details were read out in court today by the Crown. And around midnight is when it was the victim's turn to pull the trigger, but he didn't spin the chamber. So Green said, quote, "Gimme that," grabbed the gun, spun the chamber, and shot his best friend. It all happened at Green's home on Ellesmere Avenue, just north of Erie Street. The victim was taken to hospital where he died of his injuries. Police were called and Green was on the porch when they arrived, and the court heard it was the victim who brought over the prohibited revolver to Green's house with 1 round of ammunition. Green was initially charged with first-degree murder, but the Crown said due to the level of intoxication, he was unable to commit the offense of murder. Now, his defense lawyer says he'll be asking for a 5-year sentence with some credit for time already served in the form of house arrest.
I think it's a torment worse than he will face, that he'll face worse than jail. I mean, he wears that every day. These guys were drunk. They had a reputation for, essentially they were alcoholics. I mean, I'm trying to be gentle here. As the facts read out, Holmberg brought the handgun to the party, so to speak, and there were statements in the disclosure that suggested that this was not their first time, wandering down this path of playing Russian roulette.
Now, Green was present in court today for the plea, telling the judge he's making this decision on his own and not being influenced by anyone else. And the judge also wanted to be clear that by taking this plea, it's an admission of guilt that Green did shoot the gun that ultimately killed his friend, and Green agreed.
And Jason, since he pleaded guilty to manslaughter today, what happens next?
Well, because he was released on bail back in April 2017 and told to remain at his house along with some other conditions, the judge released him again on those same conditions. Green also faces other charges of possession of a firearm with ammunition, unauthorized possession of a firearm, and assault by act or gesture. The judge said those charges still remain alive and will be dealt with at sentencing. That's expected to take place January 19th, where there will also be victim impact statements read in court by members of his family, and several of them were in court today as well.
Thanks for this, Jason. The CBC's Jason Vio live in studio tonight. The Ford government says by next fall it will double the number of long-term care inspectors in Ontario. It's a major reversal for the government, which had nearly stopped those inspections before the pandemic hit. Tragically, nearly 4,000 long-term care residents would end up dying with COVID-19. Lorenda Radikop has more on the announcement and reaction.
Kathy Parks wishes the changes to long-term care inspections could have come sooner.
I definitely think it could have been a different outcome.
Her dad, Paul Parks, died of COVID-19 during Wave 1. He lived at Orchard Villa, a home in Pickering where 70 residents died. Many more were infected.
We have to think of that moment as no inspectors, practically no staff, no families. So nobody really was able to get eyes in there.
Even now, she feels the extra inspectors are still coming too slowly. The government says it will hire close to 200 more by next fall at a cost of $20 million. The same government that nearly stopped unannounced long-term care inspections in 2019.
We acknowledge that there were challenges and problems in the system. We're fixing long-term care. That, I guess, implicit in that is the fact that it was, not working the way it should have.
He says inspectors visiting homes will have more powers. The minister will introduce legislation on Thursday.
Not only are we expanding the number of inspectors, and not only are we creating this investigations component, but inspectors themselves will be able to either lay charges or other items directly. And this is not a small change.
Well, it's an admission that they had made a very egregious mistake in the first few years of their governing. The problem has never been that there aren't enough regulations. The problem has always been that they are not upheld and that we consistently allow bad actors to repeatedly break the law with impunity.
And today, a home in London is facing charges under the Ministry of Labour's Health and Safety Act. Nurse Brian Beattie died in May 2020 after contracting the virus. One of the charges relates to providing false information or refusing to give information to an inspector. Kathy Parks heard about it through a release by the Nurses Union. It gave her new hope for potential charges at Orchard Villa.
As soon as I saw it, I emailed them and I just said, listen, I have a list. We have a list of people, nurses that we'd love you to talk to. We know they were there during Wave 1.
She wants both improvements for the future in long-term care and also accountability for what happened. Lorenda Radikop, CBC News, Toronto.
Dozens of employees of Windsor Regional Hospital who were fired for not getting vaccinated are grieving their termination. The hospital let go of 62 members of its staff after they missed its vaccination deadline. 52 of those terminated employees have filed grievances under the hospital bylaw or Public Hospital Act process requests. Erie Shores Healthcare had sanctioned 14 employees for not complying with its vaccination policy, and that included 2 terminations. According to the hospital, it's now facing 3 grievances from 3 different unions. Justice the dog has died. You might remember the story from 6 years ago when the little brown dog became a local celebrity after surviving terrible abuse from a previous owner. He was brought to the Windsor-Essex Humane Society after being abandoned in a field, paws and mouth bound with tape. The man who did that to him was sentenced to 2 years in jail as the Humane Society nursed the pup back to health and helped him find a new home. Now the organization and his adopted family, while deeply saddened, hope his legacy lives on after his sudden death.
When he came to us, he was animal aggressive. He was noise aggressive. He was a fairly aggressive dog, and he maintained some of those qualities. He never did like the neighbor dogs, never did really much care for loud noises. But once he settled down, he went from being the dog who would just kind of look at you from across the room to the dog that if he wasn't laying on top of you, he was not happy. He bonded with my daughter and I. He bonded with my friends and family and just claimed them as his safe humans.
I think Justice's story was so compelling and really motivated a lot of people to advocate for better laws for animals in Canada. I think Justice was a special dog, and his story of survival really did touch a lot of people. And I think knowing that he had been through so much just gives people hope and resiliency for other dogs and animals in situations of neglect or abuse. But really, if people can focus on the fact that his story is important to remind us that we do need to continue to advocate for change, that there are weaknesses, especially in the federal cruelty legislation, and that it's up to us to advocate on their behalf. And if Justice can encourage even one more person to do that, then his legacy will keep living on.
I don't want the legacy of this poor little guy to be what happened to him. I really just want him to be remembered for the dog that he got to be after everything that happened, for the happy dog that would lay down in the sunshine and refuse to come inside, for the happy dog that probably ate too much people food, for the dog that knew how to get pets in the right spots from the people that he loved, and as the dog that just found happiness in the opportunity to be a dog.
Facing sky-high fees to connect to the electricity grid, some rural businesses and homeowners are pulling the plug on Hydro One. The privately owned utility serves about 1.5 million customers in Ontario. But as John Lancaster reports, some say they're opting for solar and wind technology instead.
Well, here we are at Country 103, and it's a beautiful day. The sun is shining.
Manitoulin Island's Country 103 went live last summer, the first off-grid radio station in Canada. It's one of 2 owned by Craig Timmermans. He says when he wanted to connect them to the existing hydro line across the street, Hydro One told him it would cost as much as $80,000.
And then on top of that, to pay, an electric bill probably at around $400 to $500 a month for the rest of my life and only increasing. I thought, well, now's the time to go off-grid.
Timmermans designed and installed a solar system and 2 wind turbines for $23,000. They provide up to 8 kilowatts of energy per hour, stored in a bank of lithium batteries, more than enough to power the stations, offices, and computer servers. A propane furnace heats the building.
It's a way of life, and it is a way that you just be a little more conscious. So on really cloudy days or stormy days or at nighttime, you remind yourself to turn computers off, turn off some of the lights that aren't being required. It's just looking at things a little bit different. And you know what? That's probably a good thing.
His high-powered 77,000-watt radio transmitters also run primarily on wind and solar. Hydro One tells CBC News, like every other energy provider, it's guided by provincial regulations that require customers to pay to hook up to the grid. The further away an existing line is, the more someone will pay to connect.
So this is where your house is going to be, on this pad?
Yes. It's a prefab, and it's going to be actually just backed right onto this pad.
Chris Hartwell is waiting for his prefabricated home to arrive in Minden Hills. When mapping out the build earlier this summer, Hydro One quoted him at least $80,000 to connect to its grid.
I don't think the average working person or retired person has that kind of money floating around.
The former Canadian Army engineer expected to pay a few thousand to bring in hydro onto his property, but he doesn't think it's fair. He was also asked to pay for a new line and hydro poles on the public road he lives on. The new line would have connected to an existing hydro pole a kilometre down the road. Instead, for $42,000, Hartwell is going to use solar and propane.
I have no use for hydro. I have no use for the bills anymore.
Back on Manitoulin Island, Timmerman says green technology is already generating electricity and savings, so the music can play on. John Lancaster, CBC News, Toronto.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has kicked off his third mandate with a major cabinet shakeup. Governor General Mary May Simon and Trudeau oversaw the swearing-in ceremony at Rideau Hall. There are 38 ministers and gender parity has been restored to the cabinet. The front bench has at least one representative from each province except Saskatchewan. Newcomers include Ontario MP Marcy Ian, Quebec's Pascal Saint-Onge, and Nova Scotia MP Sean Fraser. Dropped from the current cabinet are Marc Garneau, Bardish Chagger, and Jim Carr. The re-elected Liberal minority government still faces challenges in the ongoing fight against COVID-19. Trudeau says his team will also focus on childcare, climate change, and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. A live look outside there. You can see some of that glow from the sun setting. And we got a break today from all that rain from yesterday, although tonight we do have a 30% chance of a bit of drizzle into the evening. Colette Kennedy will be here right after the break with a look at what we have to look forward to. Stay with us. Colette Kennedy joins us now. Colette, we had a couple of days that were very wet, a lot of rain, but today we had a bit of a nice reprieve.
Yeah, nice to have that break and quite a contrast in terms of what was happening elsewhere in the province. So good to have the break because there's going to be a bit of a flip-flop into tomorrow, and we're going to get into that. I do just want to show you, first of all, kind of the outlook for this upcoming winter season. NOAA has announced that, again, we look like we're into a La Nina pattern, which we had last year, and that's a cooling of those Pacific waters off the coast of South America. El Nino is the opposite, the warming of those waters. And the impact it can have on our weather and our jet stream. You see what's happening in the west, but I want to show you what the impact likely to be is that the winter mild, just think relatively, okay? It's still winter. So above seasonal in terms of the temperatures, not necessarily as we go into the beginning of winter like November, December, more so into 2022, but also wet. So areas prone to lake effect snows, looking at enhanced snow. Even though it's mild, it doesn't mean that we won't have some snow in there too, mixing with the rain. So that's the general pattern that we're looking at for the upcoming winter. Current temperatures, they look like this because the only thing, it was nice to have the drier conditions. It was a little cool because those winds at times, now these aren't gusting over 30 kilometers an hour anymore, and that's why you don't see a number there. But Windsor, we're still getting that gust around 35, but those will be backing off tonight. There's the heavier rain. I said the difference in the province with that area of low pressure just off the coastline. But what's going to happen with some of that cloud deck is we're actually going to see it pretty heavy at times tomorrow. So it's maybe harder to break out of it here just in extreme southwestern Ontario towards the international border, whereas you will likely break out earlier than that back towards London, maybe through the afternoon, kind of Chatham-Kent, sort of on the line as we carve out that cloud cover. So tomorrow, a little more gray through Windsor, but at least without those winds. The temperatures tonight, not much change, right? We just kind of sit around where we're at. And then tomorrow afternoon, there, if you want the sun, travel east, okay? Thursday, though, looking like the best day of the week, but Halloween, perhaps not that far behind, Kat.
Not too bad. Nice mix of clouds there for the Halloween Sunday. Thanks for this, Colette.
You're welcome.
After the break, we'll take you to the future in Japan, where new technology is creating a stir. Stay with us. A member of the Japanese royal family has given up her title to marry the man she loves. Under the law, Princess Meiko couldn't remain a royal if she married a commoner, and the Japanese public objected to her choice for a spouse. So today, instead of an elaborate public ceremony, there was a quiet, private event and plans for a new life half a world away. Freelance journalist Phoebe Amoroso has the story.
Royal marriages are usually joyous affairs, but Princess Mako and Kei Komuro kept things unusually low-key. They submitted their documents to register their marriage in the morning, and then they simply held a news conference. Princess Mako described Komuro as someone indispensable to her life, and Komuro began his speech by declaring his love for her. Both apologized to those who have been troubled by the couple's marriage, but also expressed their thanks to their supporters. Princess Mako, in particular, expressed her gratitude to those who had not been misled by misinformation. The couple's engagement back in 2017 was initially welcomed by the public, but then details of a financial dispute between Komuro's mother and a former fiancé came to light regarding a debt of around $35,000. Rumors spread, fueled by the Japanese media, and the public largely turned against Komuro, questioning his motives. The scrutiny was said to be so intense that the Imperial Household Agency announced earlier this month that Princess Mako had been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. The couple have been likened to Japan's Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, especially as they are now set to leave Japan. Mako is making preparations to move to New York, where Komuro works as a lawyer. Given the opposition to her marriage, she has turned down a one-time payment of $1.3 million that is customarily given to royal females on their exit from the family. Under Japanese law, royal females must give up their royal status when marrying a commoner. However, the family is shrinking, and after Mako's exit, there are just 17 members left. There are growing concerns over its future, given a lack of heirs. Phoebe Amoroso for CBC News, Tokyo.
And speaking of royalty, Queen Elizabeth held virtual audiences today at Windsor Castle. They included a meeting with the ambassador of South Korea. It was her first day of duties since her doctors ordered her to rest last week. Queen Elizabeth is due to host next week's opening of the United Nations Climate Summit in Scotland. And that engagement is being cited as one reason why she has been urged to keep her schedule as light as possible. And have you ever wondered what it would be like to have a bigger version of those camera drones that you could hop on and take for a spin? Well, buckle up. That, folks, is the sound of the future, not your neighbor's noisy lawnmower. The hover bike, using both a conventional engine and one powered by battery, can fly for 40 minutes at speeds up to 100 kilometers per hour. But if you're hoping to fly over bad traffic, hold on to your $842,000. Strict rules mean its use is likely limited to short flights over sports venues and other regulated sites. But the creators say the bike could potentially be used by rescue teams dealing with difficult terrain. That is it for CBC Windsor News. For more, you can go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.